There's no way around it right now. TSM are in crisis mode. When you scroll through the TSM subreddit right now, you just get drama upon crisis upon drama, different iterations, different things. Somebody's leaving the org. Somebody tweeted this. Somebody, made this allegation or assertion about the way the team is run. We could have had this roster, whatever it's going to be. There's a lot of this going on, and of course, things aren't going well competitively, and that just brings everything to the front. Since TSM are kind of like the New York Yankees, or this team, the big rich team of League of Legends esports, all the anti-TSM vultures are kind of gloating on social media, getting ready to stoke the fires, and it just is turning into such. I mean, there's no other way to put it, really. Such a big crisis for them right now. But their current place in the standings in the LCS is not the real crisis. That's a side effect of the kind of team they're running, the kind of strategy they're taking, and the risks and how they're panning out. The real crisis is the fan perception and the narrative being attached to it. Of course, like I said, losing always surfaces the crisis. It makes every individual negative thing become magnified, become tied to all the other negative things, and just kind of multiply on top of one another. It heightens the crisis. So losing is kind of like putting the match to all these things and lighting them up, but these issues are here regardless, and it's not the losing itself that is really at core the problem. You've got things going on like Spica getting flamed for Shenyi being benched, being accused of having like some kind of ego war. I don't know, there are all kinds of other things out there about what's going on between them. And of course, since the team is still losing and Shenyi was benched for a bit, so there are some fans who probably have very easily naturally speculated that it's kind of a Shenyi versus Spica situation inside TSM, and they're fighting with each other. And since they're still losing, TSM made the wrong choice on how to address it, right? And nothing has come out to kind of counter this narrative. So Spica had tweeted to defend himself and saying, hey, this is not the case. There are some things that have been kind of put out, some comms clips that were out of context and out of, not when they appeared in time is not when they actually happen in time, and so they're being applied into the wrong context. Bjergsen has even tweeted publicly to defend Spica from this, and Spica is, a star player for TSM. I'd say the star player for TSM, and drama around him is a big problem for them. And then, of course, today you've got Lena coming out. She's no longer with TSM, but of course she was around for the tail end of 2021. And a lot of things she's saying are really inflaming things and stirring some things up. She said in Twitch chat, I believe it was during the LCS broadcast, that she had wanted to sign Bjergsen, and she brought Parth into it, said, hey, this is what Parth and I wanted. I don't know whether Parth agrees with her presentation of things or not. But she said, hey, once Bjergsen was leaving, she wanted to run Jensen, Doublelift, Vulcan kind of a roster, which her saying that she wanted to do it naturally means the fans believe it could have happened and would have happened if they just decided to go that way. Doesn't mean that Vulcan would have necessarily gone to TSM. Maybe he still would have gone to EG. Maybe Jensen and Doublelift would have seen the offer and decided not to, right? So I think that's context to bear in mind. Wanting it to happen does not necessarily mean it would have happened. But the fact that she says it was something they considered, and leads the fans to kind of run down that road, and the fan reaction says a lot of the fans wanted that too. Of course, the fact that TSM's current plan is losing so far, and that there's all this other drama coming out, makes any alternative look better. And then, of course, you add in all the player brands of Jensen and Doublelift and what that could have mean, and it just stirs a lot of things up. Of course, this is all drawing Reggie back into the public eye, which heightens any TSM drama because he's a bit of a divisive figure, and he's, trying to counter that narrative and put in his own spin. And hey, we wouldn't have done that. It was too expensive relative to the expected value of it. And he makes a claim about, basically the perceived ceiling of going that direction versus the cost of it. And we wanted to go for, take a bigger risk that might have a higher ceiling down the road and a longer term plan to it. Even if it had, a bit more of a slow start or a downside is less reliable, whatever it's going to be. And of course, when you bring in all this, that you get the memeing on top of it, Reggie claiming, hey, TSM will never become like CLG, in classic Reggie style, the way he presented it. So, of course, people are going to run with that. And when they are losing, especially when they're losing to CLG, that stirs things up a lot. So all of this leads to a point where there's a big crisis around TSM, and I think the memes about what Reggie has said about CLG and the historical rivalry there easily leads to the question of, are TSM in the process of becoming what CLG and the LCS has been for the past few years. And so, of course, I asked this on a poll on Twitter. It's a bit of a bait because, I wanted to kind of capture the heightened emotions and attitude right after a TSM loss. I put a bit of a meme option in there with the TSM chant, so don't take these poll results to be anything meaningful, but it does show the strength of opinion, or the strength of people's willingness to kind of jump on an anti-TSM message. And a lot of people say, hey, yes, TSM is becoming CLG right now. But here's my take on that. TSM are in crisis, but no, they're not turning into what CLG was. They may have their own issues and become their own problems that may be CLG level, but I think there's a lot of time for that to play out, right? And there are a few clear reasons that TSM are not going down that road, and why there are more positive things for them to hold on to, and why I think the very anti-TSM narrative and crisis narrative is mostly a problem of messaging and not of actual circumstances. So, I mean, for one thing, the really big problem with CLG is that they kept trying to stack up kind of mid-tier veterans, mid-tier imports, and hoping that they'd overachieve. And that's kind of what the Jensen Double Lift Vulcan approach, put Huni and Spica in there. That's kind of what that would have been, although I believe Huni, Spica, Jensen Double Lift Vulcan would probably be better than what those CLG iterations tried to be. I think it would have been a pretty decent roster, all things considered. But that would have been stacking up a bunch of mid to upper tier veterans, let's say, and hoping that they're good enough to achieve something internationally without really giving yourself opportunity to grow into a much higher ceiling. So that's the fact that they're not taking that veteran heavy approach and that mid-range approach means they're not doing what CLG did. Another big difference, they have Spica, right? This is a franchise level domestic player, and they better make sure they keep him, because that is a huge piece in their strategy, and a huge asset to build around. You could throw at everything else about their team, and if you still have Spica to build around, you've got something to run with that CLG did not have for the past few years. And the fact that they have rookies this year, that's something that CLG didn't have either. I'd say they are riskier rookies than usual because they're imports. It makes it harder to pivot away from them. It makes it, you're more likely to use import slots on proven veterans and known commodities a little bit. So there's a lot of risk in and I'm not going to spend a lot of time digging into that, but importing rookies a little more risky, I think, than importing or than having domestic rookies. And also the fact that these rookies are more risky because they aren't being backed up at academy level by reliable LCS choices. They're being backed up by 2 more import rookies. And I don't know if that's the wisest approach. It just doubles down on your risk level, and I think that's what we're seeing at the support role right now. So all of that to be said, no, TSM are not at risk of becoming CLG. If this year is a failure, TSM still have assets they can work with going forward.
With a minute left on Baron, they're going to march through and end this game. And Reggie, get the eBay account ready, buddy. It's time to sell things off.
But where does that leave us? Having assets does not mean that everything's okay and everything's going well, and that it doesn't tell us anything about how many assets or how good their assets are. The real question is, are TSM doing a good job of building something and going in a good direction that's going to play out and pan out in the end? And I would say not really. I have some concerns. I think if they fail in 2022, which is always a risk when you bring in rookies, when you take some of the chances they've taken, when you don't take the proven veterans approach, it won't have CLG level consequences over the past few years, unless a lot of other things go wrong along the way. But there still will be big consequences to it. I mean, obviously right now, perception is reality, and TSM fans are really mad about the way things are going right now. And the fact that TSM has not been able to massage those perceptions or kind of assuage those perceptions or whatever else you want to use to describe it, that's a problem. And even if the current trajectory is kind of generally positive, even if it was, or if you wanted to characterize it that way, which I think you can, the perception is that it's going downhill, and that's a loss already. And you can't afford to have the fans feeling that way for too long. The fact that there's some mismanagement, I would say, of the fan relationship right now between TSM and its fan base, and especially between the fan base and some of their players, and notably Spica, that's a really big deal. If TSM can't fix that relationship between the fans and Spica, or between the fans and Shenyi, or whatever group of fans you want to characterize, that could cost them. That could cost them assets if you want to get very businessy about it and say, if this doesn't get corrected and Spica doesn't feel well handled or well treated, he could leave the org, and that would be the worst outcome of this year for TSM, in my opinion. I think there's also some concern around what TSM have done overall as an org to put together coming into this year. Obviously, Reginald has made some big claims and some bold assertions about the amount of effort they put into scouting and developing kind of the players they brought in. But I don't think TSM scouting right now is demonstrating appropriate value for all of that effort and expense. Okay, so they ran scouting grounds events in North America, Korea, and China. Great. But this is the academy roster they ended up with out of that. And I don't really think that shows when you compare to the level of effort and investments from some other orgs in the LCS and the players they brought in and the dividends those are paying so far or look like they're going to pay. TSM can do all this work, but they don't have a talent pipeline the way that some of the other orgs in the LCS do. The only North American prospect they added to their org this offseason was Instinct, who's a mid-level prospect. You know, maybe he'll pan out, but I think there are a lot of other bot laners in Academy and below who are equally as exciting or more exciting. And while adding Instinct, they also brought in Tactical, who is still a relatively young North American player for LCS. So they didn't really bring in a prospect in a position where they had likelihood over the next few years of needing him unless something goes wrong. They kept Hyper, who last year, to be frank, didn't look like he's got a strong likelihood of, he could always overperform expectations and make it to the LCS. But right now, based on what they got fully out of him last year and what we're seeing out of him this year so far, it's not a blue chip prospect. They kept their 2 imports in Academy, 2 younger players, and they added Viper, who's like a veteran player and a backup to their most veteran LCS starter. If this is the Academy team they're going to put together after running scouting grounds events in North America, China, and Korea, then I don't think it's enough for what they put in. There were much better things they could have done with their Academy team, and they could have actually put together an amateur team, which they've tried. It didn't plan out. They abandoned it, and maybe they're going to bring it back for summer. But if they are putting so many resources into it, why didn't they have a chance to put it together already? I think this is a problem, and it indicates that TSM, aren't building up all of the assets they should be building up based on what they're investing or what they purport to be investing. So all of this together, I think TSM are in crisis mode, but I don't think the fact that they're losing games in the LCS right now is the main issue. I think the narrative is the issue. On the one hand, the fact they aren't controlling the narrative and that they aren't steering the narrative in a useful direction. And you're never going to have full control over it, but I think there's some things they could do that would help a lot. And also the fact that I don't think they've stocked their org up in a way that generates a talent pipeline, generates, having a strong academy team with young prospects and things like that gives the fans something to be excited about regardless of the wins and losses. It gives you a future to pitch and to build up, whether or not the LCS team is winning, and they haven't given themselves that as an out. But really, it is about telling a good story and connecting with their fans and giving their fans hope for the future. And I think there are a few things that they need to do right now that they desperately need to do. They need to declare very clearly to their fans, hey, you guys are heard. We're here. We're listening to how you feel, and we feel the same way you do. They need to proclaim some action, right? These are very generic kinds of things, but they need to declare some action and say, here's what we're doing about it. And they kind of tried to do that with the Yersan move, but they didn't communicate it that well. I think that's been very heavily commented on. Like, we're making a change, we're trying something, and we're hopeful that it's going to work, and come along with us and be hopeful too. And they need to project some unity and some confidence. And right now, the fact that we're having things bubble up from the players individually, from Reggie himself on social media, from other things like that, that's not projecting a unified message, and it's not projecting a confident, like, we're coming together and we're working on not only what we're going to do, but what we're going to tell you guys about it. So TSM needs to address these things. And I know, you can go back and there have been lots of media appearances from Dominic Callis recently, and I'm sure we're going to get more FaceTime from him soon. And I think he's going to be one of the main people who's going to need to kind of get these messages out there. So look to him. I know that TSM are working on these things. They recognize the position they're in. They recognize the way things are headed. And I think there will be reasons to be confident in TSM and where they're going. I do not think that them losing this many games means the sky is falling. Don't give up hope in these players or this team, but TSM need to, me saying this is not going to fix the situation for TSM and its fans. TSM themselves need to be saying the things that I'm trying to get across to you guys here. And they need to make some improvements, I think, and they're working on those improvements, I know, for building up their any talent pipeline and all these things. So don't overreach this crisis, because the crisis is mostly a crisis of perception and of storytelling. But, see where it goes, and we'll have to, no matter what direction it ends up heading in, we're going to be hearing all about it, because it's TSM, and even I can't help but talk about it. So here we are, and we'll see where we end up. Thanks for watching and supporting my content. I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and check out the channel memberships if you want to get access to custom emojis, special roles in the Oracle's Elixir Discord, and other perks.